how guns like the AK-47 work, so I thought it was pretty neat how this creature managed to evolve something so mechanical in nature. I just hope the NRA doesn't catch wind of these guys. If the government takes away our chemical weapons, only the bombardier beetles will have chemical weapons. Then what, man? Then what? Hey, do you guys remember how the Flintstones always used to use animals as tools? Like that Pelican cement mixer, you know, it's all over. Well, it's a shame the writers didn't know about the bombardier beetle, because it would fit right into the primitive shenanigans. Wilma's walking home late at night, right? Someone's sneaking up on her, hand on her shoulder, bam! Prehistoric pepper spray. Then when he's down, she whips out the eel, bam! Prehistoric taser. He thinks it's over, little does he know, she's got a cicada on a string around her neck. Bam! Prehistoric rape whistle. Police come, take him to jail, he serves his sentence. After a while, he gets granted parole, things finally looking up for him, and that's when they stick the parrot on his shoulder. Bam! Prehistoric Megan's Law. Hey, so I'm kinda new around here, so legally I'm obligated.
What? He's a pervert.
Well, what he means to say is...
Kitty diddler, what?
What? Okay, first of all, nobody got diddled, let alone...
Once a rapist, always a rapist, what?
Anyway, what was this episode about? Right. Bombardier beetle. So, yeah, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching.
Now we gotta kill some munchers and gluttons, I think. For
Hey kids, today I'm going to talk about the Great Emu War. So here's what happened, right? Our story begins in Australia, home of the Upside Down Whopper. The year is 1932. A very large chunk of the country's population lives on homesteads, just putting seeds in the ground and waiting for food to show up, you know. But their lives are hard. Firstly, Australian soil kind of blows. It's pretty terrible for farming. Like on a scale from Margaret Thatcher's corpse to Octomom, Australia's soil is a solid Hillary Clinton in fertility. Secondly, the whole Great Depression thing's going on, which automatically makes everything seem worse. And third, and possibly most important, is the emu infestation. These gangly dill holes were all over the place, just walking on crops and crapping on crops and crapping on walks and cropping on craps and crabbing on docks and captain on the rocks. You get the idea. So the government evaluated the situation. They were like, well, let's weigh our options here. As a government, we could start spending even more money to secure the welfare of our citizens through this socioeconomic crisis, money that we barely even have. Or alternatively, we could just start fucking slaughtering emus so at least it looks like we're helping. So that's what they did. Major G.P.W. Meredith of the Australian military was put in command of the operation, and he had a total of 2 soldiers at his disposal, each of which had a light machine gun. Additionally, the pair was given a total of 10,000 rounds of ammunition to be spent on taking out emus. So on paper that sounds like a piece of cake. They're basically just big turkeys on stilts, so how hard could it be? Well, apparently, pretty freaking hard. Let me learn you kids a thing or two about emus. First of all, emus are tough as hell. Their bodies are basically like meat-laden tanks. They could definitely take a bullet or 3 and still keep running long enough to get away. Secondly, these fuckers have tactics. Like guerrilla warfare, it ain't got shit on emu warfare. They start out in a big herd or flock or pod, I don't really know, let me Google it. Okay, a group of emus is technically called a mob. So you got a big mob of emus, right? And as soon as they sense danger, they break up into a bunch of little mobs and start scattering in every direction. So if you're spraying them down with a machine gun, you can't just whip it around all over the place. You have to focus your fire on one group at a time, meaning most of the others could get away pretty easily. I don't know if they had like a huddle beforehand or if this is just some coincidental product from their ridiculous bird minds, but it was effective either way. So between these two things, taking out the emus ended up being a huge struggle. Here's the story on what happened. So the crew went out in search of emus. The first time they found a mob, they started shooting before the guns were in range, so most of the emus got away. The second time, they waited until the emus were closer, but then the gun jammed, so most of the emus got away. And this sort of pattern went on for a while. At one point, they tried getting on the back of a truck first so they could chase down the mob, but the truck wasn't fast enough to catch up and the ride was so bumpy that they couldn't aim properly, so most of the emus got away. By the time they got a fourth of the way through their ammo, after 2,500 shots, only 300 or so had been killed, which is tiny compared to the 20,000 birds said to be roaming the outback. At this point, they were like, alright, if I have to look at one more of these Jimmy-legged big bird wannabes, I'm gonna start screaming, so you know what, fuck it, let the farmers handle it. Then the farmers were like, hey jackholes, we're still starving out here. You still haven't given us those subsidies you promised. We had to feed the kids fucking dingo meat, which, you know, it's a nice change of pace to have the kids eating the dingoes for once, but that's beside the point. Could you dicks keep at least trying to help us? Thanks. The guys were like, alright, don't get your bogans in a bundle. We'll keep going if only to prove a point. So they kept going, just finding mobs, thinning them out slightly, rinse and repeat, until finally they only had like 100 bullets left. In total, the unit only had 986 confirmed kills. Some emus might have also died from their wounds after the fact, but still, a very large portion of the hordes was still alive. So the military was forced to surrender for real this time. Yes, that's right, kids. The emus won the war. Of course, their victory didn't last too long, because after the failed operation, the government put out a bounty on the emus. And that worked pretty well. Something like 50,000 bounties ended up being cashed out over 6 months in 1934. So the lesson here, kids, is that if you want to commit mass murder, don't crowdfund, crowdsource. Anyway, till next time, I'm Sam Vanilla, and thank you for watching. Hey kids, you know what's cool? Entomology. I mean emetology. Etymology. There we go. Today we're going to talk about some words, some combinations thereof, and where they come from. First is the phrase white elephant. Now for those out of the loop, a white elephant is a possession which its owner cannot dispose of and whose cost, particularly that of maintenance, is out of proportion to its usefulness. And also a game played during the holidays for people who prefer random garbage over actual personalized presents. According to legend, this saying dates back to the monarchs of Siam. Whenever one of the king's courtiers drew his displeasure through whatever means, he would offer them a gift of a white elephant. It was considered the ultimate insult to refuse a gift from the king, so naturally the elephantee would be forced to accept. Now if you know elephants as well as I do, you would know that they are frickin' gigantic. They can consume around 50 gallons of water and 500 pounds of foliage every day, which would be quite expensive to keep up in modern times, let alone hundreds of years ago. Plus these ones are albino, so you have to hose them down with SPF 30 once an hour or else they'll turn into one big tumor. Okay, not really, but they definitely needed their shade. Also, Southeast Asian cultures considered white elephants sacred, so you weren't allowed to make the animal work, and you'd have to hire a load of people to care for it on a daily basis. Basically, the person getting the gift would have to choose between financial ruin or letting it die and being socially ostracized and possibly even killed. I thought this whole thing was pretty clever, so I've started doing my own version. Whenever someone gets on my nerves, I spray paint progressive comments all over their house. That way, they'll have to spend the whole day angrily scrubbing it off, and then the neighbors will be like, wait, does that mean he likes the N-word? Bigoted scum. Next is balls to the wall. This one harkens back to the days when planes flew in the air. The throttle of many aircrafts would be controlled with either a lever or a plunger, either of which were often topped with a sphere for easy handling. Thus, when you wanted to throw the plane into max thrust, you'd put the balls to the wall. In a similar vein, the phrase balls deep comes from pinball machines. When you want to launch the ball full force, you pull the plunger all the way back, otherwise known as going balls deep. Nah, just kidding. That one actually means what you think it does. Next is getting your goat, a phrase used when someone or something annoys you. The origin of this phrase is still disputed by etymologists, but one theory traces back to the sport of horse racing. In order to stop horses from getting nervous before a race, their owners would stick a goat in the stables to keep them calm. Apparently the presence of a goat has some kind of therapeutic effect on horses, kind of like a therapy dog, except they can't pet it on account of hooves, so they just sniff it for a while, I guess. Cut to a pack of young hooligans looking for something to do besides bootlegging and getting polio. They decide to break into the stables at night and escort the goat to an undisclosed location. Then when the race starts, instead of running straight ahead like a normal person, the horse would run into the crowd and drop-kick a grandma or whatever, and the old crotchety oil tycoon who owns the horse would stand up, shaking his cane, yelling, "Those punks really get my goat." Thanks to modern medicine, anxious horses today can instead be given horsey Xanax to calm them down, which unfortunately means that the days of hot-blooded goat getting are over. However, some would argue that stealing horse tranquilizers can be equally rewarding in its own way, but enough of that mumbo-jumbo. Hey, speaking of which, you ever wonder where mumbo-jumbo comes from? Nice segue, Sam. Thanks, Sam. Anyway, strap in, kids. This one's gonna be good. Mumbo Jumbo originates from the Mandingo people of West Africa. The Mandingos were a polygamous culture, and whenever a domestic quarrel broke out, they would soon hear animalistic screaming coming from the woods. They look over, and out runs this guy, known as Mumbo Jumbo. Now, Mumbo Jumbo's arrival was considered a big deal to the Mandingo. The whole tribe would sing and dance in the town center until midnight, at which point Mr. Jumbo would settle the dispute. And by settle the dispute, I mean tie the female to a post and slap her upside the head with a stick for an hour, while the rest of the village watched, all hooting and hollering. Then he'd run screaming back into the woods, where he would remain until the next complaint arose. What the Mandingo women didn't know is that Mumbo Jumbo is not, in fact, a wild patriarchal deity from the forest, but merely the offending woman's husband or one of his friends wearing a costume made from tree bark and leaves. Anyway, the guy would be babbling nonsense the whole time, which is where the phrase Mumbo Jumbo is derived from. So next time one of your superiors uses the words Mumbo Jumbo in a jocular fashion, remember to report them to HR for promoting African wife beating. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching.
Hey kids, it's Food Friday. So today, I'm going to cover some of the deadly toxins found in your local produce section. Our first item is rhubarb. Now, the part of the rhubarb that you normally eat, the delicious red stalk, is virtually toxin. Hey kids, can I tell you a secret? Come here. Closer. Nuclear energy? It's not a bad thing. Sure, 30 years ago, things like Chernobyl and 3 Mile Island were certainly something to worry about. Today, however, it's a different story. Let me tell you kids about thorium. Thorium is uranium's neighbor, just 2 houses down. He's a lot like uranium, just he's a lot more chill. Uranium's the type to do a half-assed job during the day and spend every night doing Jaeger bombs and blasting Kendrick Lamar, you know the type. Thorium, on the other hand, is more career-oriented, and at the end of the day, he's cool with just watching Netflix, eating Ben & Jerry's. Let me walk you through all the steps of nuclear power. You'll see why thorium is so great. Let's start with mining. So when somebody doesn't feel like getting out of bed, they'll, whine and moan and roll over. Likewise, when uranium doesn't want to get out of bed, he releases deadly cancer-inducing radon gas. This means workers have to put up expensive ventilation systems just to, not die. Thorium's chill. You go to wake him up, he understands he's got a job to do, goes without a fuss. And even when you do get uranium up, like the lazy bastard he has much less concentration in his ore compared to thorium, so more work has to be done just to get the same amount of material. The Earth's crust also has much more thorium in total than uranium, about 3 times as much. So you got your ore, and you've extracted it. Ready for work, right? Wrong. You see, natural uranium mainly consists of 2 different isotopes, uranium-235 and uranium-238. 238 kinda sucks in life, so uranium has to undergo enrichment to up its concentration at 238. Uranium's kinda like that kid with ADHD, right? You got him in the building, but you still gotta give him his own little room and a couple Ritalin before he starts doing anything productive. That's expensive. Thorium, on the other hand, look at him. He's got his sneaker blades, glasses on. He's ready to go. No enrichment needed. Finally, you're ready to make some power. This part's important, kids. Pay attention. So this is where the biggest difference between uranium and thorium comes in. You see, uranium is fissile, whereas thorium is fertile. This means uranium can do his job all by himself, just doing his thing all on his own. Whereas thorium's kind of a cripple. He needs a little bit of someone else just to give him the push he needs to start releasing energy. This might sound like a bad thing, but if you think about it, it's a lot safer. If you've got your power production process started, and shit suddenly hits the fan, uranium's just gonna keep going. You can try to move him around, cool him down or whatever, but at the end of the day, this man's gonna be swinging, and it's not gonna be a good day for him. Thorium, he's only got 1 leg. Piss him off, he takes a swing at you, just push him over, you're good. And that's what thorium reactors do. They allow the barely radioactive liquid thorium to drain away from its helper in the event of an accident, so there's no way for things to escalate.
much safer. But while the process for thorium is better, most of the time people care more about the results. Well, it just so happens thorium is pimpin' in that regard as well. CERN estimates that 1 ton of thorium is capable of producing as much energy as 200 tons of uranium. That's a lot. To compare, that's also equivalent to 3.5 million tons. But let's talk about byproducts. Thorium, being as pure as it is compared even to enriched uranium, produces about 100 times less nuclear waste. So whereas we might not have as many X-Men, that also means much less work has to be done to dispose of the material. Additionally, it's very difficult to make a nuclear weapon out of thorium, since it can't do much on its own. The only thing that's really weaponizable about thorium plants is that little bit of helper material I talked about earlier. But overall, that's a pretty minuscule amount. That means we can feel a lot better about plopping these plants down in places like Iran. So kids, you heard it here first. Thorium is the future.
I had a feeling you'd do that.
Reliable, and if things go wrong at the end of the day, you can still kick its ass.
If only I had that ice wyvern thing. Why is he using a shark? That's like 100 HP.
Hey kids, remember Neanderthals? Me neither, because they're dead. Some say they went extinct because of out-competition by Homo sapiens, but personally, I don't subscribe to that notion. I believe that they went extinct primarily because they interbred with early humans, not because they were inferior survivors. Now, I could ramble on for a couple of hours about the genetic and archaeological evidence for this, but modern experts have already run those points into the ground. Now, instead, I want to bring something totally new to the table that I thought of myself. I call it the sexy Neanderthal theory. Okay, hear me out. From a modern day point of view, this all sounds ridiculous, right? If someone came up to you asking if you wanted to reproduce with a Neanderthal, you'd say no, that's disgusting. Who are you? This is a mall. Where is security? But that's just what society has taught you to believe. It doesn't really reflect the true animal within you. Don't believe me? Take a look at this sculpture. Gross, right? Well, guess what? Cavemen used to whack off to that. They thought it was great. So we're gonna have to put away all of our deeply rooted cultural ideations for a second, and instead look at things from a purely biological perspective. First, I gotta learn y'all a thing or two about sexual selection. There are two main types of sexual selection. There's intrasexual selection, where members of the same sex compete for dominance, and intersexual selection, where members of one sex are intentionally choosy about who they mate with. Now, most of these are done by most animals to some degree, but with humans and most other mammals, there's a bit of an asymmetry in how either sex performs its selection. Namely, males tend to focus more on intrasexual selection, while females prioritize intersexual selection. This isn't just me stereotyping, I swear. There's actually an evolutionary reason for this. See, whereas males barely invest anything at all into mating in the absence of monogamous culture, childbearing is a huge deal to females, using up a lot of resources, so it only makes sense that males would want to be more promiscuous and females more selective. So to recap, The Bachelorette, that's an accurate portrayal of our most basic instincts. On the other hand, if The Bachelor were to be done with a bunch of cavemen, there wouldn't be this season-long show, just a 5-hour special where The Bachelor bangs every contestant at once, which, in all fairness, would still be higher quality entertainment than the show we have now. Anyway, what's all this got to do with Neanderthals, you ask? Well, it just so happens the male Neanderthal's morphology makes it so that they would be able to outman the male Homo sapiens, both intrasexually and intersexually. For one, their thick bones and heavy joints suggest that they had way more muscle mass than humans of the day, putting them at a huge advantage both in asserting dominance and in appearing attractive. Secondly, their facial features exaggerate all the characteristics that makes a face appear male in humans, with square, well-defined jaws and heavy brow lines, further increasing their appeal to human females. Broad shoulders, that's hot. Also, their large chest cavities and broad nasal passages would make it so that their vocalizations would be much louder than humans, adding still to their intimidation factor. So basically, when the male Neanderthals strut into a human village, they'd be guaranteed Casanovae, ensuring that they would interbreed. But what about the Neanderthal females, you ask? If the men are more manly by default, surely the women would conversely be more man-ish. One would think that this homeliness would counteract the reproductive success of their male counterparts, but this is where that whole sexual asymmetry thing comes in, because whereas the human females would be selective towards the Neanderthals, the males don't really care. They're gonna take what they can get. Their women already waltzed off with those jabronis, they're lonely, what's a guy gotta lose? So in the end, when a population of humans meets a population of Neanderthals, there'd actually be an increased chance of genetic admixture, thereby making extinction through interbreeding seem like a much more plausible outcome for the Neanderthals. If the Nobel Committee is watching, I'd like my prize sent to this address. Thank you.
Hey kids, let's talk about babies for a second. Now I think we can all agree, generally, babies suck at most things, either literally or figuratively. They have almost no life skills whatsoever. However, as it turns out, babies do actually have some traits that make them superior to adults in certain isolated aspects. In this video, I'm going to tell you guys about a few. First is the baby's non-drowning reflex. If babies under the age of 6 months are put underwater, they'll instinctively hold their breath. Additionally, their heartbeat begins to slow down as soon as they swim, which allows them to use much less oxygen and, as a result, stay alive much longer than the average person. As we all know, babies get themselves into bad situations all the time. As soon as your back is turned, they're off trying to lick another socket or whatever. So this reflex probably evolved from back in the day, right? Mom's off picking berries, baby wanders off, ends up in the middle of a lake, and somehow this whole reflex thing gives the village more time to, go get a raft and fish them out. Next is a baby's grip. They're able to support their entire body weight with just one hand, which is more than a lot of adults can do. Of course, it's kind of cheating because they only weigh as much as a baby, but it's still kind of impressive. This trait is shared by apes, whose babies instinctively cling on to the backs of their mothers. So that way, if she gets a little courageous swinging from branch to branch, the baby doesn't just go flying. Anyway, because of this, it's speculated that babies actually got their firm grasp from our ape ancestors millions of years ago. And it's only a bit later in life when your genetics go, oh yeah, legs neat, and ditch the whole grabby thing. Next, babies are also very seductive. Not in the sense of like strutting around in thigh highs, making dudes' eyes bulge, not that seductive, but just in the sense of, hey, I like looking at this thing. We should keep it alive for a while. Here's an example. If people saw a 5-year-old on the streets rolling around in a pile of its own shit, they'd be like, ugh, what a scumbag. But if an infant did it, people would still be like, oh man, little guy, I want to take you home, clean you up, put you in little hats. Yeah, it has to do with a baby's facial features like their large forehead and eyes, which set off a bunch of baby caring instincts in our brains, causing us to perceive cuteness. It's only when they hit like 2 or 3 when that all goes down the shitter. Lastly, babies have a surprisingly good concept of morality. According to a study by Yale University's Infant Cognition Center, babies are born with an innate sense of right and wrong. Here's how the study went, right? So first they put on a puppet show for the baby with these 2 rabbit dolls, and they made one of them act nice and the other one act like a dick. Then at the end of the show, the babies were offered either puppet, and in almost every case, the babies took the nice one. And you might say a strong grip on morality doesn't qualify as a superpower. Personally, I disagree. People are terrible at keeping their basic sense of right and wrong unless their society maintains it for them. Let me give an example. A few days ago in the Philippines, the president of the entire country basically said, hey, we should just start murdering every drug addict alive. Right now. And this isn't seen as insane over there, no. Millions of Filipinos are now on board with this. It is fucked. You see, babies lack the mental capacity to justify atrocities with shit like it's about the greater good, They have no prejudice, they just see people as people. And honestly, I think we could all learn a thing or two from that. Not to get all George Carlin-y on you guys or anything. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Sam Manella, and thank you for watching.
You've come to take away my treats?
Hey
I
kids,
can't
I've
allow
been told
that.
by a lot of people that there's
battle.
nothing more exciting than the metric system. They may have a point, but I can still prove them wrong. Today, we're going to talk about some specific lesser-known units of measurement. First is the Schmidt Pain Index. Now, anybody could tell you that getting stung by a bug tends to hurt, but just how much does one sting hurt compared to another? Are yellow jackets worse than hornets? Are fire ants worse than honeybees? Nobody in the world of science knew for sure. That is, until a young upstart by the name of Justin Schmidt decided to boldly go where no entomologist has gone before. But how did he plan to quantify the level of pain caused by different insect stings? Well, it went something like this. Alright, honeybee. Ow, god, that hurt. I'll give that like a 2. Next, paper wasp. Okay, that's like a 3. Next, let's try bullet ant. Jesus Christ, Mary Mother of Satan's left hand. It's like my hair is made entirely out of urethras, and each and every one is having a red-hot catheter put in and ripped out 5 times every second. My very being is on fire. My only desire left is for death himself to bless me with sweet relief. I'll give that a 4. No. 4 plus. In all seriousness though, I'm pretty sure the index is meant to be logarithmic, like earthquake magnitudes. So just like a magnitude 7 earthquake is 10 times as powerful as a magnitude 6, a bullet ant sting causes 100 times as much pain as a honeybee. In total, Schmidt cataloged 78 different species of the order Hymenoptera, which includes ants, bees, and wasps. You can tell a man is really dedicated to his job when, after getting stung by 77 insects, he says to himself, you know what, that wasn't enough. I need one more creature to inject its venom into me, and only then will this list be complete. I guess you could say he just really gave a Schmidt. Next is the Waffle House Index. So for those of you that didn't know, the Waffle House is one of the most resilient establishments in the world. Whereas most restaurants would simply close down in the event of, say, a hurricane, Waffle House just goes from their normal mode to disaster response mode, following extensive protocol that allows that location to keep serving customers in spite of low food supply or even a power outage. In response to this business practice, FEMA came up with what is known as the Waffle House Index, which is a system to easily assess how badly an area is damaged by a natural catastrophe. If the Waffle House is fully open, they're in the green, which means things are basically fine. If the Waffle House is using their low supply menu, you're in the yellow, which means that the area is almost certainly mid-disaster. Finally, if you're in the red, that means the Waffle House is either closed or gone. Now that's a sign of some real nuclear zombie holocaust type shit going down, so if you're not already dead, you should probably vacate the area. Most engineers could tell you that, structurally speaking, the triangle is the strongest of all shapes. But I believe that there's one shape that's even stronger. Godspeed, Waffle House. Next we have the APGAR score. So the APGAR score is a rating system used by hospitals to determine how healthy a newborn baby is on a scale from 0 to 10. It's called APGAR based on its 5 criteria, which include appearance, pulse, grimace, activity, and respiration. And each of these is rated on a scale from 0 to 2 to get your final score. Personally, I think this set of standards is a little flawed. Here's an example. Well, it's completely blue, and it doesn't really want to move at all, but it's got a really fast heartbeat, and it's screaming really loudly. I'd give this baby like a 6 out of 10. That's good enough. So in response, I've invented my own rating system. It's called the RAGU score. R is for reflexes. It's common knowledge that if you hold any healthy baby by its feet and then drop it, it'll always land upright. If your baby can't do that, that's a sure sign that it's defective. A is for abnormality. If your baby seems weird, that's typically a good indicator that it's weird. G still stands for grimace, just like in the APGAR test, only instead of looking at the baby's facial expression, you just bring grimace from McDonald's into the room and see how the baby reacts. If it starts crying, that's a good sign because grimace is absolutely fucking terrifying. And finally, U is for ugliness, just because that might sway your decision on whether or not you want to keep it. Now, if the baby passes the test, it gets to go home, but if it fails, then it gets shipped off to the factory and made into RAGU, hence the name of the test. Some people might be upset by this fact, but you know what they say, Prego today, RAGU tomorrow. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching. Today's video has been sponsored by RAGU brand pasta sauce. Like the taste of pureed infants? Then you'll love RAGU pasta sauce. Hey kids, today I'm going to talk about the different kinds of straws. So first you got straw. This was the first kind of straw to be used by humans. Many of this straw is still called straw because it was discovered before plural nouns were invented. Good for roofing, good for feeding livestock, and it can also be used to make straw men, which are good for holding back society. Straw rating, 6 out of 10. Then there's classic straws, a beverage conduit incredibly simple in form, yet highly effective in use. In fact, these devices have caused me to create a new philosophical principle. I call it Onella's straw. It's totally identical in every way to Occam's razor, except for the fact that it only applies to straws. Anyway, straw rating, 10 out of 10. Next on the food chain are bendy straws. These are proof that just bending something a little can make it that much better. Bend a breadstick, you got a pretzel. Bend a sword, you got a scimitar. Bend the rules, you got a badass. Bend the truth, you got a nomination. Bend a straw, and you've got, a slightly more convenient straw. Straw rating, bendy 10 out of 10. Next is the last straw. I don't really know what it looks like. All I know is that it makes girls never talk to me again. Straw rating, cry wank out of 10. Then you got crazy straws. In the words of Dr. Ian Malcolm, your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. This quote is frequently misattributed to having been talking about bringing dinosaurs back to life, when in reality he was talking about the invention of the crazy straw. The crazy straw is a perfect example of humanity's tendency to overdo things just to get our sick kicks. When my gaze falls upon a small child across the room at Olive Garden, gently sipping chocolate milk through a crazy straw, all I see is a misguided youth wasting his life. Straw rating, 9 out of 10. So after all this, I figured, hey, if we already got the crazy straw, we might as well double down here. So I invented something that goes beyond just crazy. I call it the Menace to Society straw. Patent pending. Straw rating, fuck you, God is dead. Out of 10. Anyway, that's all for today. Till next time, I'm Salmonella, and thank you for watching.
En revanche, elle cultive un goût particulier pour les tout petits plaisirs. Plonger la main au plus profond dans son vin, briser la croûte des crèmes brûlées avec la pointe de la petite cuillère.
Hey, what's up guys, welcome back to Benjamin Babish, where this week we take a look at the creme brulee from Amelie. Now the objective with creme brulee is to get as much of this flavor into here as possible, and one great way to do that is with vanilla sugar. And it's very easy to make. Just dump 2 cups of plain white sugar into the bowl of the food processor, scrape 1 whole vanilla bean, and dump the little seed thingies into sugar and process. Don't process it too much, we're not trying to make confectionery sugar here, but enough so that the vanilla beans are evenly dispersed throughout the sugar and you've got a full cauldron of sugar smoke. Pour into a mason jar for easy storage and add the scraped carcass of the vanilla bean in thirds for extra vanilla infusingness. This stuff keeps at room temperature forever, and it makes a pretty great gift once you've wrapped it with a decorative piece of whatever this is, or maybe some butcher's twine. Now you're cooking with Pinterest. Simply tie that up and tie a little bow on top. That looks like something nice that your aunt can scrub herself with or something. But enough preparing for Christmas in the middle of April. It's time to start making creme brulee, and as you can see, I've got a selection of different vanilla flavors here. But why not use that bullshit Christmas present your nephew gave you and measure out 75 grams of vanilla sugar, to which we're going to add 2 cups of heavy cream. And whether you use vanilla sugar or not, let's cut and scrape a whole vanilla pod and add it to the sugar cream mixture, which we are going to bring to a gentle simmer over medium-low heat. And as soon as it starts simmering, take it off the heat. We don't want to scorch this. We don't want to overcook it. We're now going to strain it and set it aside to let it cool so we can make custard out of it. And to make custard, of course, we need eggs. 6 egg yolks in this case, to be precise. Now, there are a lot of ways to separate egg yolks from egg whites, and I'm just sort of dumping them all on a plate and pulling them out with my hands. And now I've got a nice plate of egg whites to make a very healthy omelet. I'm wrapping a moist kitchen towel around my bowl so I can whisk one-handedly as I slowly drizzle the cream sugar mixture after it's cooled for 15 minutes. Once you've added about half the sugar cream mixture, the eggs are pretty much tempered and you can dump it in a little bit faster. And there you go, the beginnings of a very easy custard. Now to fill our ramekins, we're going to repurpose our moist kitchen towel and place it in the bottom of a nice deep casserole so our ramekins don't slide around. We're going to carefully fill each one almost to the brim, leaving a little bit bit of headspace, but we want them pretty full for easier torching down the line. Now we need to make a bain-marie, or hot water bath. Now I like to use a gooseneck kettle like this one because it gives me more control when pouring in the boiling water, and I don't make a rookie mistake like accidentally getting water up. Eventually we're going to get the casserole full of boiling water, so it comes 2/3 of the way up the sides of the ramekins. Then we've got our oven set to 300 degrees Fahrenheit. We're going to very slowly, carefully, bake these guys for anywhere from 25 to 40 minutes, depending on the size and depth of your ramekins. They are not going to look done. In fact, they're going to have an almost liquidous jiggle to them. But this is what we're after to prevent cracked surfaces down the line. We want to hit 175 degrees Fahrenheit before trying fruitlessly to get these things out of the bain-marie. Once the water gets low enough, you should be able to just use your UV gloves and then use the remaining steam for a little makeshift spa day. The things we do to cleanse our pores, am I right? Anyway, we're letting these guys cool at room temperature for about an hour until completely room temperature, and then we're going to wrap them and place them in the fridge for at least 4 hours, ideally overnight. And now, finally, the fun part. Torching. I tried a few different kinds of sugars, and the best one for making a crispy, crackling crust was turbinado, or raw sugar. Hold your torch so the tip of the flame is just barely touching the sugar, and slowly, gently, patiently form a brown, crackling crust. This takes a little bit of practice, and even the burnt ones taste pretty good, so you can't really lose. We're going to re-refrigerate these for 45 minutes, and then it's time to get cracking. The sound is of the utmost importance to Amelie, so let's listen in. Now that was relatively satisfying, tastes better than it sounds, so I think we need to go bigger. A larger surface area, after all, is going to give us more creme to brulee. These guys are going into the same 300 degree Fahrenheit oven for closer to 25 minutes due to their shallowness. We want to get that same jiggle going, and another 4 hours later, it's time to sugar them up and torch them down. Now for these guys, I thought we would go full ASMR, so I set up the microphone, got my best whispery, breathy voice ready. Let's listen in. Hey guys, welcome back to Barney Battery, where we'll be tickling your ear holes with a whole bunch of triggers. Fart noises.
Atkins, right?
They caught a parasite over there. Doctors don't know what it is.
What do they eat? Tabbouleh?
Actually, that's why I'm here. I've been dying for a Satriali's veal palm hero.
Who lives in a chicken parmesan hero under the sea?
How good is that? See?
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to Binging with Babish, where this week I am craving a Parmesan Hero. And as you just saw, I will use any excuse to make one. The only clip that I couldn't find was for eggplant Parmesan. Eggplant Parm deserves more attention, and why is everybody laughing at me? Before we get into manhandling our eggplant, we need to focus on the building blocks of the Parmesan Hero. First and foremost, a good sauce. We've made Italian red sauce a few times on this show. This
We
is
must go into the cave and find more information about
but
grub.
this time
I'll see you inside.
roast the sauce with a cocked lid for 4 to 5 hours at 325 degrees Fahrenheit, during which time we can get to making our meatballs. I'm starting by pouring a little bit of buttermilk over 3 slices of torm. Get our egg for about 45 minutes. Matter because this
say one in there.
You're about to enter a dungeon. You're about to enter a dungeon.
I'm gonna get enough money to get a bigger house. Goodness. That's why I do that. I just need to. What? Great. Hey, that's all I need.
Wait.
Get him. Blop. There we go, that should be good. Big. These are some whopping. 50 more about. Heck. Catfish is like 200. It's big. Alright, time to buy the house. Good. Oh, it's 15K. Shit. Let me sell some. They only. Selling any.
Yeah, 40.
So much stuff. Far Cry fishing, I sleep. Black Desert Online AFK fishing, I sleep. Wizard 101 fishing. That's a real man's game. That's a long boy. I just saw it. There we go.
Telltale Games, a game developer that really needs no introduction. What with all their success and influence throughout the industry, I'd be surprised if you didn't know about what they do. Let me give you a quick synopsis though. Established in mid-2004 by Dan Connors, Kevin Bruner, and Troy Molander, Telltale Games was a team of game developers who originated in part due to LucasArts canceling a sequel to Sam & Max Hit the Road, a game that fans were looking forward to from the team. The founders of Telltale and their employees took this opportunity as being independent game developers to try their hand at making their own games, eventually securing the rights to various franchises like Jurassic Park and Back to the Future. It wasn't until they signed a multi-year, multi-platform, multi-title deal in association with Warner Brothers Interactive Entertainment to create a Walking Dead-inspired adventure game that they really garnered critical acclaim and rapid financial success. This newfound growth allowed the company to expand, sign more deals with other companies to make more franchise-inspired games like Game of Thrones, Guardians of the Galaxy, and But lately, I feel like something has been off with a lot of their games. So, I didn't get introduced to Telltale until the first season of The Walking Dead. I know there was a lot that came before this title, like Sam & Max, which has attained somewhat of a cult classic status, and Jurassic Park the game, but I feel like it's important to separate Telltale's history into pre-Walking Dead and post-Walking Dead. See, prior to The Walking Dead, Telltale had some success and a following, but nothing compared to the likes of The Walking Dead Season 1's aftermath. No longer were their games centered around puzzle solving as traditional adventure games had been, but now the focus was on decision making and QuickTime events. The Walking Dead cemented what made a Telltale game a Telltale game in the eyes of the masses. Not to mention, the game was hugely impactful to the industry as a whole. Many mark The Walking Dead Season 1 as the point when the popularity of adventure games was revitalized, and it's not very hard to see why people think this. In its first 20 days, the first season of The Walking Dead sold over 1 million units, capping off at 8.5 million units by the end of 2013 alone. This success allowed Telltale to expand into the large company they are today. I feel it's also important to mention that The Walking Dead Season 1 was excellent by its own merits. Usually, when you see a game based off of a popular movie or TV show, you get some negative expectations of what it could be like, what with all the shovelware that is run rampant, like Frozen, Olaf's Quest, or Puss in Boots. But The Walking Dead is nothing like this. It tells the tale of a criminal, Lee, suddenly thrust into the world of a zombie apocalypse, where he soon has to protect this little girl, Clementine, from both the living and the dead. The crux of the narrative is trying to find Clementine's parents, while also being sidetracked by the needs of other human allies, like Kenny and his family, Krista and Omid, Lily and her father, and either Doug or Carly. As with any compelling story, it's these characters and how they respond to the world around you that makes it so interesting. As an example, in the first area of the game, when the group is trapped in a pharmacy and walkers are closing in, you have to make the couple-second decision to save either Doug or Carly, letting one or the other be brutally devoured by zombies. You've already seen the torment the victims of these cannibalistic creatures go through, so you have to put one to death. And what's even more messed up is that it's usually the one you like more, the one you bonded with more. However, each of these characters has been given adequate screen time to feel fleshed out and real. Some people might call this decision to have the player choose only one survivor as cheap or cliche, and while I would agree this is definitely nothing new when it comes to ultimatums, that doesn't make it or any other similar big decisions that follow any less compelling. What's even more interesting is that whoever you choose to survive sticks around longer, giving you time to regret your decision or accept it. I played The Walking Dead Season 1 because of the emotional, engaging stories Sean Vanneman and Jake Rodkin were able
You've
to
just
convey.
received a
Seeing
housing
Lee
deed.
grow
You can
from a
select your
criminal
new. When
to
you
a
click the go,
compassionate
if you
father
you can
figure
have up
is
to
so
3 castles
satisfying.
plus your
The same
dorm
can
room.
be said for
You
all
must
the character
empty a
arcs,
castle
like
of all its
Clementine's
furnishings
loss of innocence
before
or
you can
Kenny's
sell it.
redemption as a selfless individual. The gameplay in Telltale games is pretty poor. QuickTime events aren't my favorite. But with this game in particular, due to the brilliant execution of its main goal to tell an interesting story, it manages to succeed even despite that. After Season 1 ended, I wanted more. I wanted a continuation of what happens to Clementine. There were so many deliberate loose ends that I was so excited for the inevitable Season 2. When I finished Season 1, I became a fan of Telltale. How could they fuck up their future from such a strong starting point when they had literally everything going for them? I think one minor blow to Telltale's future was when the lead writers and project leaders of The Walking Dead Season 1, Sean Vanneman and Jake Rodkin, left the company to pursue other endeavors. These two crafted a great story, and seeing them leave and not be part of Season 2 was concerning. I always wonder what would have happened if these two had stayed on the team and were part of Telltale's future products. That's all hypothetical though. After all, Telltale did give us The Wolf Among Us right after The Walking Dead Season 1, which was pretty enjoyable. It gave me hope that Telltale could continue in the right direction with Season 2 of The Walking Dead. Then the game came out, and after playing it, I thought it was pretty decent.